Welcome to the Alex Jones Show on this Friday, December 27th, 2013. I'm David Knight filling in for Alex. Although Alex is going to be joining us in the second hour, he's going to be breaking down a lot of important news that's coming out, a wide range of news. We've also got some other interesting things that happened just the last couple of days. On December the 23rd, on Monday, we posted a video about the Federal Reserve, actually comparing it to It's a Wonderful Life. Now, in spite of the fact that the entire movie is up on YouTube and that it's been up there for nearly 2 years come February, and that it's had over 700,000 views of the entire film, our film was singled out and shut down for quote-unquote copyright reasons. Even though the entire film is up there and has been there for 2 years, it was shut down. And the interesting thing about it is that as people echoed and mirrored that report on YouTube, and as we linked to it on our page on InfoWars, as we linked on that report page talking about the video itself, the videos that we would link to would be taken down, but only those videos. So it's not something that's happening with a bot. And of course, what we did was fair use anyway, but they have the entire movie up there and have left it up there for 2 years. What we did was a report that was essentially a commentary on the similarities between what the banker Potter did and what the Federal Reserve did, essentially similarities between J.P. Morgan and other issues, other commentaries about the movie. And most of it was covered with a voiceover. There were pictures that were taken out selectively. That is all fair use. That's political commentary. But again, understand that the entire movie is up and only the videos that we linked to from InfoWars are being taken down. So we're going to have that report later on. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to break that down for you in a little bit more detail. We're also going to air the entire video for you. So if you're watching this on the website or on Prison Planet TV broadcast, you can see the entire report. And we have the report up on Prison Planet TV for those of you who are subscribers. Now, we're also going to be talking in this program, we're going to have William Binney, the highest-ranking NSA whistleblower ever. Now, he was the technical director of the geopolitical world, as they called it. It was essentially the rank of a general in the NSA. And after the September 11th attacks, he came out and basically blew the whistle on what the NSA was doing. They changed their approach at that time, he believed. Now we know that it was earlier than that. They were also doing this, but he came out protesting what he learned at that time, that they were doing a full surveillance of everything, a dragnet surveillance, if you will. Of course, he said later on, he said they don't need a dragnet because they're getting every fish in the sea already. And so he came out and protested that along with several other NSA high-ranking officials, although he was the highest. He's going to be joining us to talk about that. You know, about a year ago, he said we're this close to a police state, held his two fingers just a little bit apart. And just recently, he came out and said, we do have a police state. So we're going to have him break that down for us. He was a cryptographer, so we're going to talk to him about some of those issues as well. We want to get his take on what he thinks needs to happen to roll this back, to get the NSA under control. This is somebody who worked there for 30 years and knows it from the inside out. So stay tuned. That's going to be a really important interview. Now, it's the end of the year, so of course the government has their wish list. And what is always at the top of the government's wish list under Obama? It's gun control. Yes, gun control and new taxes. That's what they're looking at for you for the new year. They're eagerly anticipating getting rid of ammunition and also registering a lot more guns in a lot of other places like Connecticut. We've got people lining up in Connecticut to buy guns before new laws go into effect. So the EPA is also coming out and coming after ammunition. And we're going to have that story right after the break. It's one of these things where, isn't ammunition part of the right to keep and bear arms? Is it just having an empty rifle? Is that what the Second Amendment about? No, it's not. It's about arms. It's about having bullets as well as guns. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about that right after the break. Now you can watch the InfoWars Nightly News streaming live as it happens for free.
Check it out at Infowars.com/show.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex on this Friday, December 27th, 2013. We've got a lot of breaking news today. Alex is going to be joining us in the second hour. He's going to be talking about a lot of different breaking news that's coming out. He'll be live in studio. We're also going to be joined by the highest-ranking NSA whistleblower ever, and that's William Binney. Now, he resigned over the dragnet collection of information that we all have learned about through the Snowden docs, although we were covering it for quite some time here at InfoWars, and there were occasional articles from the mainstream media. But this went all the way back to 2001 that William Binney and others left the NSA. And they left not just because of the unconstitutional illegal collection, although they were very clear about that being unconstitutional. They also said that what the government was doing was actually ineffective. It wasn't as effective as what they were doing constitutionally. In other words, instead of looking for a needle in the haystack, they were trying to take the entire haystack and go through it. And that's what he's been talking about quite a bit, about how the government is storing every single thing, and it's making them actually less effective with the flood of data. But he was also concerned about crony capitalism. And we did a report on crony capitalism. We did a report on the Federal Reserve on Monday, the 100th anniversary of the Federal Reserve. It's called It's a Wonderful Lie. It was based on It's a Wonderful Life, pointing out the similarities between the way the Federal Reserve acts, the way it was created, the methods used to create the Federal Reserve. You know, J.P. Morgan was involved in the 1907 panic, and he was also the arbiter of the bailout that came after that. They used that to establish in the public mind the idea. They manufactured a public panic, and then they manufactured public consent for the Federal Reserve. And so we point that out in the video. We point out several different things about the Federal Reserve. We also talk about religion. We also point out that they saw prayer as a very effective way to approach the problems, that God hates oppression. And so we can confidently pray that God is going to do something to stop it. Evidently, that was something that Paramount didn't like, because every time we linked to the video, they took it down, claiming a copyright violation. However, understand this, the entire video, the full movie, has been up for nearly 2 years on YouTube, has gotten over 700,000 views without any copyright claims made on it by Paramount. But our videos that were political commentary that's protected by fair use were taken down over and over again. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We're going to play the video for you later in the program, and we're going to have William Binney from the NSA, and Alex Jones will be here breaking down a wide range of news. Now, as I said, the government is coming at us with their wish list. And their wish list, of course, at the top of the Obama administration's wish list is always gun control. And so they're coming at us now through the EPA. Because if they can't get something passed through the Congress, then what's the Obama administration's tactic to use this? Well, they'll just do executive orders, or they'll use the various agencies to regulate something as if it were law. And so now the EPA is pushing for gun control by pushing for green ammunition mandates. Now, we reported earlier this year that the last remaining lead smelter was shutting down at the end of the year here in America. If you consider that, we're only going to have lead sources just from recycled batteries and that sort of thing, because we're not going to be allowed to produce lead anymore in this country. Of course, the Chinese will be allowed to produce lead in this country. Remember that about 6 years ago, 2007, the EPA came out and decided that they were going to eliminate all lead that could possibly touch a child. I'm serious. They were going to take out everything, lead in zippers. They were going to put restrictions on people that were reselling used children's clothing. They were going to shut all of that down. They were even going to not allow the resale or the sale of any kind of recreational vehicles that would have lead possibly in some of the engine parts, because, you know, the kid might put his mouth all over the hot engine or something. That was all driven by a child who swallowed a bracelet and died. Now, I don't know how big the bracelet was. They blamed it on the lead poisoning. They said that it was 90% lead, what they had swallowed. The interesting thing is that that bracelet was made in China. China is still going to be allowed to make lead. But we can't have lead in anything. And the tactic that they're taking in terms of coming after ammunition is exactly the thing that is most scary about this to me. Because, you know, if you look back at the assassinations of the two Kennedys and Martin Luther King, They used that to push through the Gun Control Act of 1968, basically putting a lot of restrictions on handguns. Ironically, 2 of the 3 of the people who were killed, according to the official story, by sniper rifles. And of course, they were killed by sniper rifles. Only 1 of the 3 was killed with a handgun. That would be Robert Kennedy. And then they banned handguns. They didn't ban long rifles. But now we see that they're coming after ammunition. And that's quite a bit smarter approach, because your guns don't really do you any good, obviously, if you don't have any ammunition. The Second Amendment is not about having empty rifles. It's about having arms. And part of having arms is having ammunition. Now, at the very beginning of the Obama administration, they stopped recycling brass into the market from the military. That's something that had always been done, and the Obama administration stopped that. Now, what did that do? What kind of an effect did that have? Well, that was going to raise the price of ammunition quite a bit, because there wasn't going to be any used brass coming back in to make bullets. The same thing that will happen with this lead prohibition from the EPA. They went in, had a couple of senators who got very upset about that. They wrote letters. They got that turned around. But we learned at the end of last year that at least one fort in New York is still crushing their brass and selling it very cheaply to the Chinese as scrap, rather than selling it back into the market as they are supposed to do, as they've been ordered to do. So the concern is that they're coming after ammunition. It's not just bullets, but they're going after the number of the size of the magazines, and that's happening in Connecticut. We see that people are waiting in line here just before the end of the year. They're waiting in line to register their assault weapons and their quote-unquote high-capacity magazines. And here's what one of the persons said who was waiting in line. He says, if they're trying to make them illegal, I would have a real issue. But if they want to know just where they are, that's fine with me. Well, maybe he ought to talk to our guest that's going to be on in the last hour, William Binney, because out of all the whistleblowers who resigned, and they came after all of them, and they tried to prosecute them with charges, but William Binney was the only one. When they executed a search warrant, they came into his house, he was taking a shower, and they pointed guns in his face while he was in the shower. Now, he's the only one of the NSA whistleblowers who had registered guns. And that's what they did to him. Having a registered gun, having to register your gun, is basically taking a fundamental privilege and turning it into a government-granted, a fundamental right, and turning it into a government-granted privilege. And that's what they're doing with this. It's a precursor to confiscation. And one of the things that we have to be concerned about with this EPA legislation about ammo is that if we're going to get lead bullets, we're now going to have to import them. And of course, the UN Arms Trade Treaty is all about stopping the importation of arms. And they're going to count bullets as arms as far as importation goes, if that's to their advantage. That's something we really need to watch out. But it's always about the government turning things into privileges. It's always about them gradually infringing upon our rights. One of the stories that really amazed me that came out of Popular Science, and it was kind of a joke story, but it's not really a joke. The USDA issued a livestock permit for magical reindeer to enter the United States. No joke. They actually inserted themselves into the fantasy life of children to get them to understand at an early age that they don't have the right to do anything. Everything is a government-granted privilege. This is absolutely amazing. When you look at the declaration, it says that the reindeer are going to be cleared to come in as long as they get microchips on their ear and so forth and so on. It's absolutely insane that the government would make everything a privilege, that they would actually come in and glorify themselves by saying that we're going to graciously allow these magical reindeers to come in for just a 24-hour period. We're going to let them continue their journey across the country, around the world, spreading holiday cheer as they go. Isn't that nice that the government bureaucrats will move out of the way for Santa's reindeer? And we also have a breaking piece of news here that's on the Drudge Report. The Chinese state media is touting that a new bomber can nuke U.S. bases. This is more of the bellicose chest beating that we're seeing coming out on a regular basis from the Chinese military, the Chinese government. Very concerning for us. Hopefully this is something that is just for internal consumption, but it does look like tensions are building up. We've seen them extending their territorial lines, of course. That's one of the big stories that's happened in the last couple of months, how we've got now overlapping territorial claims between the Japanese, the South Koreans, as well as the North Koreans and the Chinese. They're all claiming these same little islands there. And we see this happening over and over again. We see China saying that they're going to, that they can reach with nuclear weapons. They already released a map showing that they could reach several cities in the United States with their nuclear bombs. Now they're saying that they've got a bomber that can nuke U.S. military bases, something to be very concerned about. And it's something that, as you've heard before, Joel Skousen believes that our greatest threat from nuclear contaminations is not a nuclear reactor that's going to blow up, although these things are like ticking time bombs. They're getting older and older. Many of them have already lived past their designed useful life, and they just arbitrarily extend the license to them. But he's very concerned that it's essentially going to be a stand-down situation, as he's told Alex, that the U.S. government will stand down, allow the Chinese to do an initial strike, and then use that as justification to enact martial law. They're always looking for some kind of a justification to increase their power. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. We'll be right back with more news. Stay tuned.
The facts are in. The studies are legion. Sodium fluoride and other members of the fluorine family that are added to Western water supplies are devastating the health and cognitive ability of the people that drink it. So the question is, why are the social engineers adding it to the water? Simple. Dumb down the host population that the parasitic technocracy is feeding on. We developed Fluoride Shield to be the highest quality, highest standards, because I use it every day and my family uses it every single day. Let's take a closer look at the ingredients that make up this special proprietary formula. Tamarind has been celebrated for its ability to immobilize toxic fluoride residues, while zeolites have a long history of attracting and holding toxic compounds. Enter fulvic acid, an excellent cleansing agent. Then we added the highest quality shilajit, a rare compound that is collected from the high mountains of the Himalayas. We topped it all off with the powerhouse herb cilantro that is intended to mobilize fluoride and other dangerous compounds for removal from the body. And the final touch to energize this formula is our proprietary nascent iodine. And as always, consult your physician as well, because that is important. And finally, Fluoride Shield, Survival Shield, and all the products at InfoWarsLife.com grew out of my quest to try to find the very best compounds from God's cornucopia to protect myself and my family. And from our research, I believe we are bringing you the best, highest quality products. And you have that commitment from Alex Jones and the entire InfoWars crew.
Now, we were just talking in the last segment about how the government is using gun control or ammo control to shut down bullets. Actually, it's the EPA that they're trying to put regulations on. This is a common tactic. We have congressmen who, instead of legislating, they give wide open powers to bureaucracies. And these bureaucracies then interpret the law as they see fit. I think in large respect, that was what Nancy Pelosi was talking about when she said, well, we have to pass a law to see what's in it. They do that with the Obamacare law. They did that with the Dodd-Frank bill. They allow these regulatory agencies to put in all of the details. So they just give them these broad sweeping powers. And then when they do awful things, the congressmen can present themselves as heroes to come back in and roll that back. But they've delegated, they've abdicated, actually, their legislative authority. And that's one of the things that Rand Paul pointed out when he came up with these three reforms that he suggested. One of them is read the bill, write the bill, is what his second reform. And the third reform was one thing at a time. That really kind of hits the main ways that the government, the Congress, has abdicated their responsibility. They put these gigantic bills out there without reading them. They put a whole bunch of different things in it. They usually have a title that has nothing to do with what it is. If it is a title that has something to do with it, it's exactly the opposite. So you have like the Patriot Act, or you have the Affordable Care Act. And of course, the Affordable Care Act is anything but affordable. And you know, there's new Obamacare fees that are coming in 2014. This is an article from the New York Post, and they're pointing out that there's some hidden taxes there that maybe you don't understand. There's a 2% levy that's going to be put on every health care plan. That's something coming out of your pocket. Insurers are going to pay an additional 3.5%. You won't see that on your bill, but of course that will be hidden in the cost. You won't see that as an itemized portion of your bill. But just like Social Security, you may think when you look at your pay stub that you're only getting like a 7.65% hit on your Social Security, but actually your employer is doing a matching portion on that. So you're actually paying like 15.5%. So the bottom line is the government has done this type of trick before. And just like Social Security, they're starting these taxes out at a very low initial rate, at only 2 or 3%. And you're going to see them rise, just like you saw Social Security rise. And you're going to see that only a half, or in this case, less than a half. You're going to see 2% levy on your insurance bill, but then, of course, there's going to be a 3.5% fee that's going to be embedded in the insurance rates that you're not even going to see. And then, of course, there's the 2.3% medical device tax that's also going to go on things like pacemakers and stents and prosthetic limbs. So there's all these multiple taxes that are hidden from your view. And these taxes come on as very small taxes. And they're hiding some of the stuff. Some of the stuff is out there. It's kind of like the very initial income tax. That was only put on the richest people, and it was only about a 1% tax initially. And so a lot of people said, hey, I don't care. That's going to be affecting the other person. Then they found that the rate kept going up, and then it turned into a wage tax. It wasn't just a tax on investment income, which is what it was initially. And so they grow these things. You see this kind of creep that is happening, and that's what we're seeing happening with Obamacare. Of course, Chief Justice Roberts said that it was a tax. Of course, I kind of wonder if he was being blackmailed with that or not after all the information that we've seen coming out about the dragnet collections of the NSA. And of course, he wrote both decisions, the dissenting decision and the decision that the Supreme Court went with. And he did an abrupt 180. And many people at the time suggested that maybe he was being blackmailed with some information there. And we subsequently learned that they got information on the director of the CIA, Petraeus. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that another powerful man would be blackmailed with information. As a matter of fact, that's what makes that kind of information so powerful. And it's one of the reasons that we don't want to give that kind of power to the NSA. They should not have that kind of broad sweeping power. And so we've got William Binney is going to be talking to us at the end of the program in the third hour. Here's some other news, too. If you remember, there was a 60 Minutes story just a couple of weeks ago, and everybody was criticizing them for what a puff piece they had done on General Keith Alexander, and that, of course, was done by John Miller. And everybody was pointing out that John Miller was someone who had worked for the NSA, he had worked for the Defense Department, he had worked for the New York Police Department in public relations. And they were saying he's still doing public relations, and he was, and guess what? It is now official. He is returning to the New York Police Department. He's just changing the label. He's been doing nothing but public relations for the government the entire time.
Now you can watch Alex Jones live at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
You can also browse the network, the InfoWars Nightly News,
and over 60 movies and documentaries all together in one place.
You can watch the Alex Jones radio show live as it happened.
So check it out, Infowars.com/show.